Lily didn't see them coming. 1 second she was juggling her messenger bag and a cardboard box of archival supplies, trying to fish her keys from her jacket pocket. The next, someone grabbed her from behind, arm around her waist like an iron bar, hand clamping over her mouth before she could draw breath to scream. The box flew from her hands. She heard the crack of expensive micro spatulas hitting pavement, the scatter of acid-free paper across wet concrete. Her bag, laptop inside, thesis notes, her entire academic life, slid into a puddle. No, she tried to scream anyway. The sound died against the leather glove pressed over her lips, came out as nothing, as less than nothing. Quiet. The voice in her ear was male, accented, cold as a blade. Be smart. Smart. The word was almost funny. Lily had 2 graduate degrees. She could read Latin and medieval Italian. She could restore manuscripts so delicate they'd crumble if you breathed wrong. But none of that had prepared her for this, for being lifted off her feet like she weighed nothing, for being dragged backward into darkness while the museum's security light became a distant, useless star. She kicked, hard, her sneaker connected with someone's shin. Porca putana! A different voice, younger, pissed off. She's fighting! Then make her stop. Something pressed over her nose and mouth. Cloth, sweet-smelling, chemical. Chloroform, her brain supplied helpfully like she was taking an exam. Used in kidnappings. Causes unconsciousness in approximately 2 minutes. Side effects include... The thought dissolved. The world tilted sideways. Lily's legs turned to water beneath her. Someone caught her. She felt herself being lifted, felt the night air against her face for 1 more second before everything went black. Her last conscious thought was absurdly practical. I left the conservation lab unlocked. Hello, my friend. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. That was the first thing that came back. Not sight, not sound, just pain. Her head throbbed like someone had used it as a drum. Her wrists burned. Her shoulder screamed where it was pressed against cold metal. Lily tried to move and realized she couldn't. Her arms were wrenched behind her back. Wrists bound so tight she could feel her pulse hammering against the restraints. Zip ties. The plastic bit into skin with every breath. A blindfold covered her eyes. Not cloth. Silk. Expensive silk that someone had tied tight enough to make her temples throb. Well, she thought through the haze of pain and terror, at least my kidnappers have good taste. That's something to tell the police, if I live long enough to meet police. The humor was reflexive, a defense mechanism her brain deployed when things got too real, like the time she'd accidentally spilled coffee on a 14th century manuscript and spent 30 seconds mentally writing her resignation letter before remembering she could just fix it. That's what she did. She fixed broken things. She was currently the broken thing, and the fix seemed significantly more complicated. She was moving. No, being moved. The floor beneath her vibrated with engine noise. A van. She'd been thrown into a van like cargo. Voices filtered through the panic. Male, Italian, speaking too fast for her college-level comprehension to follow, but she caught fragments. Quanto manca? 20 minutes. He's waiting at the estate. She better be the right one this time. Right one. The words made her stomach drop. They thought she was someone specific. Someone they'd been looking for. Okay. Think. She forced herself past the panic. You're Lily Summers. You make $23,000 a year restoring books. Your most valuable possession is a first-edition Peterson's Field Guide that you bought at a yard sale. You are objectively not worth kidnapping, which meant this was a mistake. Which meant when they figured it out, the van hit something, pothole, speed bump, and her head bounced against the floor. Stars exploded behind the blindfold. She bit her tongue, tasted copper and fear. Don't scream. Don't let them know you're awake. She counted heartbeats instead. Lost track around 300, started over. It was something to do that wasn't panicking. The van stopped. Lily's heart rate spiked. This was it. Whatever was going to happen was about to happen. The back doors opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying scents that didn't belong together. Pine trees and expensive cologne. Night air and money. "Get her," Boss said unmarked. "Don't damage her." "Oh, good," Lily thought hysterically. "I won't be damaged, just terrified and possibly murdered, but at least I'll be pretty." Hands grabbed her arms. She was hauled out of the van, her legs buckling the second her feet touched ground. Someone caught her, steadied her with an impersonal grip. "Walk!" She stumbled forward, guided by hands on her shoulders. Gravel, then smooth stone, then the acoustic shift of entering somewhere massive, high ceilings, hard surfaces that made every footstep echo. Marble under her sneakers now. They walked forever. Left turn, right turn, the click of expensive shoes on expensive floors. Expensive kidnappers, she catalogued mentally. Estate, marble, security-level coordination, either mafia or very committed book thieves, and honestly at this point I'd prefer book thieves. A door opened. She was pushed forward, gently, almost courteously, which was somehow more terrifying than violence, and pressed down into a chair. Leather, soft. The kind of furniture that cost more than her yearly salary. The zip ties snapped free. Blood rushed back into her hands with painful intensity. "Stay." Footsteps retreated. Door closed with a sound that felt final, irrevocable. Lily sat frozen, the blindfold damp with sweat against her eyes. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Okay. You've read enough thrillers to know how this works. Don't antagonize the kidnappers. Be cooperative but not weak. Try to humanize yourself so they don't— Another door opened, closer. Different footsteps, measured, controlled, heavy with authority. Someone entered the room and the air itself changed, became charged with something that made every instinct scream danger. "Remove it." The voice was male, low, Italian accent curling around English words. The kind of voice that expected obedience like it was a law of physics. Lily's hands shook as she reached up and pulled off the blindfold. Light stabbed her eyes. She blinked, vision swimming, colors and shapes slowly resolving into, oh no. The office was designed to intimidate and it was working spectacularly. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking city lights. Dark wood everywhere. Books lining shelves that reached toward impossibly high ceilings. A fireplace carved from black stone. Everything expensive, controlled, speaking of power that didn't need to announce itself. And behind the desk sat a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a Caravaggio painting, if Caravaggio had painted mafia bosses. He was young, early 30s, but there was nothing young about the way he commanded the space. Dark hair swept back from a face of brutal Mediterranean beauty. Sharp cheekbones, strong nose, a jaw covered with precisely maintained stubble, olive skin that probably had never seen an ordinary day of sunlight. His eyes were what held her frozen, dark brown, almost black, watching her with an intensity that felt physical, like he could see through skin and bone straight into her soul. He wore all black, expensive black, sleeves rolled back to reveal forearms covered in intricate tattoos, saints and sinners, crosses and family crests inked into skin, heavy rings on his fingers that looked more like weapons than jewelry. He looked like power. He looked like danger. He looked like every terrible decision a woman could make, gift-wrapped in Italian tailoring. Well, Lily thought semi-hysterically, if I'm going to be murdered, at least my murderer is devastatingly attractive. That's something. "You're awake," he observed, his voice that same low rumble. "Good." Lily's throat was dry, but she forced the words out anyway. "I'd like to report a kidnapping." Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe. "To whom?" "The police, the FBI, the museum security department." She paused. "Are you the Museum of Crime Curators? Because I'd like to file a complaint about your acquisition methods." His lips twitched, just barely. "You won't be making any calls, not until we've had a conversation." A conversation. Lily's fear was transforming into something sharper, anger, maybe, or just exhaustion. Is that what we're calling felonies now? Tell me your name, he said, ignoring her sarcasm entirely. Tell me why I'm here. Your name, he repeated. And this time there was steel under the silk. Lily Summers. She watched his face carefully. Does that ring any bells? Because I'd really love to know why someone drugged me and dragged me away from my extremely boring life restoring books nobody reads. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he pulled out his phone, movements controlled and precise. His expression grew darker with each passing second. Finally, he set the phone down. When he looked up at her again, something in his eyes had shifted, hardened. Lily Summers, he said slowly, 24 years old, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Conservation Department, Rare Book Restoration, graduate degree, lives alone, East Village. No criminal record, no connections to organized crime. No reason whatsoever for me to have taken an interest in you. The precision of his knowledge made her skin crawl. Then why? Because, he interrupted, standing now, moving around the desk with fluid grace, my men were supposed to acquire Valentina Volpe, the fiancée of Marco Volpe, who has been moving against my operations. We were going to use her as leverage. He stopped directly in front of her chair, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. But they grabbed the wrong girl, he continued softly. They grabbed you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Then let me go. This is a mistake. I won't say anything. You've seen my face. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it worse. You've been inside this estate. You're a trained observer. You notice things others miss. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. You cannot leave. Not yet. Not until I decide what to do with the wrong girl who knows too much. What's your name? The question escaped before she could stop it. His lips curved. Not quite a smile. Serafino Greco. Well, Serafino Greco, Lily heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. I hope you have a really good lawyer, because kidnapping charges are serious and I'm pretty sure, but I grabbed the wrong person isn't a valid legal defense. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, low, genuine, surprised. You're either very brave or very foolish, Lily Summers. I'm a grad student, she said. We're all a little bit suicidal. He stood looking down at her with those impossible dark eyes. You belong to me now. Wrong girl or not, you're mine until I decide otherwise. The words hung in the air between them like a verdict. You belong to me now. Lily stared up at Serafino Greco, at his perfect, terrible face, at those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not acceptance, not submission. Something closer to the moment when you're restoring a manuscript and realize the damage is worse than you thought, that this is going to take longer, require more precision, demand more of you than you'd planned. I don't belong to anyone, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. I'm a person, not a rare book you can just acquire for your collection. His lips curved slightly. No, you're far more complicated than a book. He straightened, moving back toward his desk with that controlled grace. Books don't talk back. Then you're reading the wrong books. He glanced at her over his shoulder, and for a moment, just a moment, something almost like amusement flickered in his expression. Then it was gone, replaced by that same calculating intensity. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to the chair she'd just vacated. I'm already sitting. Sit comfortably. This will take time to explain, and I prefer not to repeat myself. Lily stayed exactly where she was, perched on the edge of the leather chair, like she might need to run at any moment. Which, to be fair, she might. Serafino sighed. A small sound, barely audible, but it carried the weight of someone dealing with an inconvenience. He sat behind his desk, leaning back in his chair, and studied her with that unnerving focus. "Here is your situation, Lily Summers," he began, his accent making her name sound almost lyrical. "I cannot release you. You've seen my face, my home, my operation. You heard my men speak. You're trained to notice details. It's your profession. Within an hour of your release, you could provide police with enough information to cause significant problems for me." "I wouldn't." "You would." His voice cut through her protest like a blade. "Perhaps not immediately. Perhaps you'd convince yourself you could forget, move on, return to your normal life. But eventually, when you felt safe, when the fear faded, you would talk. To a friend, to police, to someone. It's human nature." Lily wanted to argue, but the terrible thing was, he was right. She would tell Mia. She'd have to. Mia would notice she was missing, would file a report, would ask questions. And Lily had never been good at lying to her best friend. "So what's the alternative?" she asked. "You keep me locked up forever? Because that seems logistically complicated." "The alternative," Serafino said, leaning forward, "is that you work for me." Lily blinked. "I'm sorry, work for you? Doing what exactly?" "I restore books. Somehow I don't think your organization has a lot of damaged manuscripts lying around that need archival attention." "You're going to pose as someone else," he said simply, "for 1 month, after which, assuming you've fulfilled your contract, you'll be free to return to your life." "Pose as—" Lily's brain struggled to process this. "You want me to pretend to be someone? Who?" "Valentina Volpe." The name meant nothing to her. "The woman your men were actually supposed to kidnap?" "Yes." Serafino pulled a photograph from his desk drawer and slid it across the polished surface toward her. "Marco Volpe's fiancée. Or rather, his former fiancée, as of this morning, when my men took you instead of her." Lily picked up the photo with shaking hands. The woman staring back at her was beautiful. Dark hair, elegant features, the kind of bone structure that suggested old money and good breeding. She looked nothing like Lily. "We look nothing alike," Lily said flatly. "Volpe and I have never met face to face. Our organizations operate through intermediaries. He's seen photographs of you, or rather, of Valentina, but only from a distance, at social functions. With the right styling, the right coaching, you could pass." "This is insane." "This is business." Serafino's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "Marco Volpe has been consolidating power, moving against my territories. His engagement to Valentina was meant to legitimize his operations. Her family has connections to banking, politics, legitimate society. With her at his side, he becomes untouchable." "So you wanted to kidnap her to stop the wedding," Lily said slowly, her mind working through the logic despite her terror. "Leverage." "Precisely. But since we now have you instead of her, we'll do something better. You'll appear publicly as Valentina, at galas, charity functions, social events. You'll be seen with me, not Volpe. It will humiliate him, destabilize his alliances, and force him to respond emotionally rather than strategically." Lily stared at him. "That's your plan? Social warfare through mistaken identity? While you play the decoy, my people will retrieve a ledger Volpe stole from me, one that contains information I need. The distraction of Valentina choosing me over him will occupy his attention while we move. And what happens when the real Valentina shows up? When someone realizes I'm a fraud? The real Valentina is currently enjoying an unexpected vacation in a very comfortable, very remote location," Serafino said smoothly. "She'll remain there until this is concluded. As for being recognized, Valentina has been out of the public eye for 6 months traveling abroad. People change. Hair, makeup, styling. You'll be surprised how easy it is to become someone else when everyone wants to believe you are." Lily set the photograph down, her hands trembling. "I can't do this. I'm not an actress. I can't lie convincingly. I barely remember to water my plants. You want me to infiltrate high society and pretend to be someone I'm not?" "I want you to survive," Serafino said quietly, "and this is how you do it. By becoming your puppet? By becoming useful." His eyes locked onto hers. "You have two choices, Lily. You work for me for 1 month, appear at functions, play your role, help me retrieve what Volpe stole, and then you go free with enough money to pay off your student loans and fund whatever botanical research you desire. Or—" He paused, letting the word hang. "Or—" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Or you refuse, and I'm forced to make you disappear permanently, not because I want to, you're clever and spirited, and I find that somewhat refreshing, but because I cannot allow someone with your knowledge to exist as a threat to my operations." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing weather, not murder, made Lily's blood run cold. "That's not a choice," she said. "That's coercion." "Yes," he agreed, "it is. But it's the only choice you have." Lily's mind raced. She thought about Mia, who'd be frantic by now, about her thesis, unfinished, about her plants, slowly dying on her fire escape, about the manuscript she'd been restoring, a 15th-century herbal with hand-painted illustrations that would probably be assigned to someone else now. "What about my life?" she asked. "My job, my friend. My everything?" "Your friend Mia will receive a message from your phone explaining that you've accepted an emergency consulting position at a private collection in Europe. Very prestigious. Very sudden. You'll text her occasionally to maintain the fiction. She'll never believe that. She'll want to believe it. People generally do." Serafino stood, moving around the desk again. "As for your job, the museum will be informed of the same. 1 month, Lily. 4 weeks. Then you return to your life, considerably wealthier and with an impressive addition to your resume." "And if I say no?" He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Then you're not as intelligent as I thought you were." Lily stared up at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who held her entire life in his hands, and felt something harden inside her chest. Fear, yes, but also anger, and underneath it all, the same stubborn resilience that had gotten her through graduate school with no money and no support. "Fine," she said, 1 month, but I want it in writing, a contract, with specific terms." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You want to negotiate?" "I want protection. Legal documentation that I'm cooperating under duress, something that proves this wasn't voluntary when this goes wrong." For a long moment he just looked at her. Then slowly he smiled. A real smile this time, not the dangerous curve from before, but something that suggested genuine surprise. "You are full of unexpected qualities, Lily Summers." He pressed a button on his desk. "Matteo will show you to your rooms. We'll begin preparations tomorrow." "My rooms? Did you think you'd be sleeping in a cell?" His voice held a trace of amusement. "You're playing the role of a woman I'm courting. You'll be treated accordingly." The door opened. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked like every bodyguard from every movie Lily had ever seen. "Take her to the East Wing," Serafino instructed. "Make sure she has everything she needs." Lily stood on shaky legs. As she moved toward the door, she couldn't resist one last comment. "You know, for a kidnapper, you have excellent interior design sense. Very Architectural Digest meets organized crime." She heard Serafino's low laugh behind her as Matteo led her into the hallway. The rooms turned out to be a suite larger than Lily's entire apartment. Bedroom with a bed that could sleep 4, sitting area with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, bathroom with marble everything and a tub that was basically a small pool, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens lit by subtle landscape lighting. It was beautiful. It was luxurious. It was a cage. Matteo positioned himself outside the door, not guarding exactly, but present, watching. Lily stood in the center of the bedroom, surrounded by more wealth than she'd ever seen in one place, and felt the fear she'd been holding at bay finally crash over her. She sank onto the edge of the bed, which was, annoyingly, the most comfortable thing she'd ever sat on, and tried to think. 1 month. She had to survive 1 month pretending to be someone she wasn't, playing a role in some mafia power struggle, all while being held captive by a man who looked like a Renaissance painting and spoke like death wrapped in silk. Okay, she thought. Okay. You've dealt with difficult situations before. You once restored a manuscript that had been damaged by water, mold, and what appeared to be cat urine. You can handle this. She stood, moving to the window, the estate stretched out below her. Gardens, walls, lights in the distance that had to be the city. Somewhere out there was her real life, her apartment, her friend, her future. She just had to survive long enough to get back to it, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to turn being the wrong girl into being the right person to bring Serafino Greco's entire operation crashing down, if she didn't get killed first. Lily woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. In a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, wearing clothes that weren't hers. For a blissful 3 seconds, she thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. Then she saw Matteo's shadow outside her door, and reality crashed back in with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. Right. Kidnapped. Mafia. Shadow fiancé. The usual Tuesday morning. She sat up, taking stock of her situation with the same methodical approach she used when assessing a damaged manuscript. First, identify all problems. Second, prioritize by severity. Third, develop a restoration plan. Problem 1. She was being held captive by an Italian crime boss who looked like he'd stepped out of a Caravaggio painting. Problem 2. She had to pretend to be someone else for a month or face permanent disappearance. Problem 3. The bed was so comfortable she'd actually slept well despite the existential terror, which felt like a moral failing. She threw off the covers, silk, because of course they were, and padded to the bathroom. Someone had left clothes for her. Expensive clothes, the kind with tags that probably had Italian names she couldn't pronounce. Well, she thought, examining a cashmere sweater that cost more than her monthly rent. If I'm going to be a captive, at least I'm a well-dressed one. Over the next 3 days, Lily fell into a routine. Not by choice. Routines were forced on her through the simple reality of captivity, but she adapted because that's what she did. You didn't become a book restorer without learning patience, observation, and the ability to work within extremely precise constraints. She studied the estate like it was a manuscript, memorized the layout during supervised walks through the gardens, counted the guards' shift changes, 6 a.m., 2 p.m., 10 p.m., like clockwork, noted which doors were locked, which windows had sensors, where the security cameras had blind spots. Matteo accompanied her everywhere, silent and watchful. She tried conversation a few times. So, Matteo, do you have a family? Silence. How long have you worked for Serafino? Silence. If you were a rare book, what kind would you be? I'm thinking maybe a medieval psalter. Very serious, lots of illuminated intimidation. He'd almost smiled at that one. Almost. Serafino himself was absent. According to the staff, a small army of people who appeared, cleaned, delivered meals, and vanished like very efficient ghosts. He was handling business, which Lily assumed meant doing crime things she was better off not knowing about. She spent her time in the estate's library, because of course there was a library, and of course it was spectacular. 3 stories of books, rolling ladders, first editions that made her fingers itch to touch them. Someone in Serafino's organization had taste. Probably Serafino himself, given how he'd looked at her when she'd mentioned his interior design sense. On the 4th morning, Lily woke up with a plan. It was a terrible plan. Possibly the worst plan she'd ever conceived. But captivity was making her restless, and she needed to do something or she'd lose her mind. She was going to attempt an escape. Not a real escape. She wasn't that delusional. The estate was a fortress. Matteo was basically a wall with legs, and she had no idea where she was in relation to the city, but a symbolic escape. A test. She needed to know exactly how much freedom she didn't have. Plus, if she was being honest, she wanted to see what Serafino would do. The opportunity came that afternoon during her supervised garden walk. Matteo's phone rang, the first time she'd ever heard it make a sound. He answered in rapid Italian, his attention diverted for exactly 15 seconds. Lily didn't run. Running would be stupid. Instead, she calmly walked toward the hedge maze at the garden's edge, a ridiculous, Gothic monstrosity that probably appeared in the estate's architectural magazine spreads, and slipped inside. She'd studied the maze from her bedroom window, had sketched it out on hotel stationery someone had left in her room. Right. Left. Straight. Right. The center had a fountain and, more importantly, a maintenance shed. Her plan was simple: get to the shed, climb onto its roof, use it to reach the top of the exterior wall. From there, well, she'd figure that out if she got there. She made it to the fountain in under 3 minutes. The shed was unlocked. First lucky break. Inside, she found exactly what she'd hoped for: garden supplies including rope and a trellis that could work as a makeshift ladder. Okay, she thought, her heart pounding. This is actually working. This is impressive. Lily spun around so fast she nearly dropped the trellis. Serafino stood in the shed's doorway, blocking the exit. He wore black again. Did the man own other colors? And his expression was somewhere between amused and annoyed. You made it farther than I expected, he continued, leaning against the doorframe with infuriating casualness. Matteo is quite upset with himself. I wasn't actually escaping, Lily said, which was technically true. I was just exploring. With rope and a ladder. I'm very thorough in my explorations. His lips twitched. You were going to climb the wall. The thought had crossed my mind. It's 20 feet high, with sensors and cameras. And Matteo would have caught you before you made it halfway. I know, Lily admitted. I just needed to see if I could get this far, for my own peace of mind. Serafino studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A real laugh, low and genuine, that transformed his entire face. You attempted an escape you knew would fail just to prove you could try, he said. That's either remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. Grad student, Lily reminded him. We're all a little bit suicidal. He stepped into the shed, and the space suddenly felt much smaller. You have spirit, Lily Summers, more than most people in my world. Most people in your world probably weren't kidnapped against their will. Fair point. He gestured toward the door. Come. If you want to explore, I'll show you the parts of the estate you're actually allowed to see. That evening, unable to sleep, Lily found herself wandering the halls of the estate. Matteo had been replaced by a different guard, younger, less intimidating, who followed at a discreet distance but didn't stop her from moving around. She ended up in the library again, drawn to it like a moth to flame. The space was empty, lit only by ambient lighting that made the leather-bound spines glow like jewels. She climbed one of the rolling ladders, running her fingers along the shelves, reading titles in Italian, Latin, French. Someone had curated this collection with serious knowledge: Renaissance philosophy next to medieval theology, botanical texts from the 16th century, first editions that belonged in museums. She pulled out a book almost reverently, a first edition of Dioscorides de Materia Medica from 1554. The leather binding was in remarkable condition. Someone had taken care of it, had understood its value. You have good taste. Lily nearly dropped the book. Serafino stood at the base of the ladder, looking up at her with that same intense focus. You scared me, she said, clutching the book to her chest. You're in my library at midnight. I could say the same. I couldn't sleep. She climbed down carefully, the book still in her hands. This is an incredible collection. Who curated it? I did. He moved closer, taking the book from her hands with surprising gentleness. Over many years. This one I found in Florence. An estate sale. The family didn't know what they had. It's in remarkable condition. Someone loved it once. Yes. His fingers traced the binding. Someone did. They stood close now, the book between them like a bridge. In the dim light, Serafino looked less dangerous, more human. The sharp edges of his face softened. His eyes, usually so controlled and calculating, showed something that looked almost like loneliness. "Why books?" Lily asked quietly. "Why collect them if your business is—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Violence? Crime?" He smiled slightly. "Books are permanent. They outlast empires, survive wars, carry knowledge across centuries. Everything else in my world is temporary. Alliances, power, even life. But books—" He set the Dioscorides back on a table with careful precision. "Books remain. That's almost poetic. For a kidnapper. I contain multitudes." Lily laughed despite herself. "Did you just quote Walt Whitman?" "I read, Lily. Perhaps you shouldn't be so surprised." "I'm not surprised, I'm just—" She paused, searching for words. "I'm trying to reconcile the man who collects rare books with the man who had me drugged and thrown in a van. Perhaps they're the same man." His voice was quiet. "Perhaps people are more complicated than the worst thing they've ever done. That's a convenient philosophy for someone who does terrible things." "Yes," he agreed. "It is." They fell into silence. Lily found herself studying him, really studying him, the way she'd study a manuscript to understand its history. The tattoos visible at his collar, the slight scar through his left eyebrow, the way he held himself, always controlled, always aware of the space around him. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "The crime, the violence, all of it. You clearly have money, taste, intelligence. You could do anything." "I do what I was raised to do. My father built this organization, his father before him. It's legacy, Lily, heritage. The same reason you restore books, to preserve what came before." "That's not the same thing at all, isn't it?" He moved closer, and she found herself backed against the bookshelf. Not threateningly, just close. "We both inherited something from the past. We both work to maintain it, protect it, pass it forward. I preserve knowledge, you preserve violence. I preserve family, there's a difference." His hand reached past her, pulling another book from the shelf. Their shoulders brushed, just barely, just enough for Lily to feel the heat of him, smell that dark cologne that had haunted her since the kidnapping. The book he'd pulled was in Italian. He opened it, showing her an inscription in faded ink. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said quietly. "He taught me to read using these books. Before he taught me the family business, he taught me literature, philosophy, history. He used to say that a man who only knows violence is just an animal, but a man who knows beauty and chooses violence anyway, that's a dangerous man. Is that what you are? Dangerous?" He looked at her, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "Yes." They stood frozen, the book between them, the air thick with something Lily couldn't name. Tension, awareness, the strange, impossible pull of attraction to exactly the wrong person. "I should go," Lily whispered. "Yes," Serafino agreed, but neither of them moved. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers brushed her jaw. Just barely, just enough to make her heart hammer. "You're not what I expected, Lily Summers." "Neither are you, Serafino Greco." The moment stretched between them, dangerous and electric. Then Serafino stepped back, breaking the spell. "Your training begins tomorrow," he said, his voice returning to that controlled, business-like tone. 6 a.m. Don't be late." He left the library without looking back. Lily stood alone among the books, her heart racing, her skin still warm where he'd touched her, and tried to convince herself that whatever had just happened meant nothing. She failed. Lily stood in front of a mirror that was probably worth more than her car, if she still had a car, and barely recognized herself. The transformation had taken 6 hours. 6 hours of hairstyling, makeup application, wardrobe consultation, and what could only be described as deportment coaching from a terrifyingly elegant woman named Julia, who spoke 4 languages and had opinions about posture that bordered on religious fervor. "Valentina Volpe does not slouch," Julia had said approximately 70 times. "Valentina Volpe glides. She does not walk. She processes through space like a queen." "Valentina Volpe sounds exhausting," Lily had muttered. Now, looking at her reflection, she understood the effort. The woman staring back at her looked nothing like Lily Summers, broke grad student who lived on coffee and denial. This woman wore a gown that probably cost more than a semester's tuition, deep emerald silk that made her skin glow and her eyes look mysterious rather than tired. Her hair, usually pulled into a functional bun, cascaded in dark waves over bare shoulders. Diamond earrings, real diamonds, Julia had assured her, caught the light with every movement. She looked expensive, sophisticated, dangerous. She looked like someone Serafino Greco would choose. "You look perfect," Julia said, appearing behind her with the sudden silence of expensive staff everywhere. "He's waiting downstairs." Lily's stomach dropped. "Right, the gala, the public debut of the fake fiancé, just a normal Friday night. Remember everything I taught you. You are Valentina Volpe. You attended boarding school in Switzerland. You speak 4 languages. You summer in Lake Como and winter in Gstaad. Your father owns shipping companies. Your mother collects modern art. You are cultured, sophisticated, and completely unimpressed by anyone in that room. Except Serafino." "Except Serafino," Julia agreed. "With him you are intrigued, drawn despite yourself. He represents danger you've never experienced. It excites you." That part won't require much acting, Lily thought, but didn't say out loud. She descended the grand staircase in heels that required more engineering than seemed structurally sound, one hand on the railing trying to remember Julia's instructions about gliding versus walking. Serafino stood at the bottom, and Lily's breath caught. He wore a tuxedo that looked like it had been designed specifically for his body, probably because it had. Black on black, perfectly tailored, making him look like some Renaissance prince who'd traded his kingdom for something darker. His hair was swept back, his jaw freshly shaved, those dark eyes watching her descent with an intensity that made her nearly miss a step. "Careful," he said quietly, offering his hand as she reached the last stair. "I need you intact for tonight." How romantic. Every girl dreams of being needed for strategic Mafia purposes. His lips quirked. "You look..." He paused, searching for words. "You look perfect." Something in his voice made the compliment feel more real than it should. Lily took his offered hand, feeling the warmth of his skin, the controlled strength in his grip. "I feel like a fraud," she admitted quietly. "Good." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, brief, subtle, devastating. "The best performances come from people who don't quite believe their own lies. It keeps you sharp." "Is that what this is? A performance?" He looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Tonight, everything is a performance. Remember that." The gala was held at a historic villa that made Serafino's estate look modest by comparison. Lily had approximately 30 seconds in the car to have a quiet panic attack before they arrived, and Serafino's hand covered hers. "Breathe," he instructed. "You're brilliant. You've prepared. All you need to do is be exactly who you are, clever, observant, sharp, while wearing Valentina's face. No pressure. Immense pressure. But I believe you can handle it." The car door opened. Camera flashes exploded like stars. Serafino stepped out first, then offered his hand. Lily took it. Emerging into a wall of light and sound and barely controlled chaos, she remembered Julia's instructions: smile but not too much. Look confident, but not arrogant. You are valuable, and you know it. Serafino's hand settled at the small of her back, possessive, protective, real enough that she could feel the heat through silk. They walked into the villa together, and Lily felt 100 eyes tracking their movement. "They're staring?" she murmured. "Of course they are," The question is why? Because they believe you're Valentina, or because they suspect you're not? That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Inside, the villa was a masterpiece of Renaissance architecture and modern wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast light over marble floors. Servers in white gloves circulated with champagne. Every person in attendance looked like they bought their clothes from places that didn't have price tags. Lily's academic brain automatically catalogued details. 17th century frescoes on the ceiling, likely restored. Original Caravaggio in the corner, possibly stolen given the company. Furnishings that belonged in museums. Stop analyzing the art, Serafino said quietly. Valentina wouldn't care about provenance. Lily does, though. Tonight, Lily doesn't exist. They moved through the crowd together. Serafino introduced her with casual confidence. Valentina Volpe, my companion for the evening. Each time, Lily felt a small thrill of successful deception as people accepted the lie without question. She fielded questions about her family, her education, her interests, answering with the backstory Julia had drilled into her until she could recite it in her sleep. She laughed at appropriate moments, remained politely distant at others, and felt herself settling into the role like it was a costume she'd worn before. "You're a natural," Serafino murmured during a quiet moment. "I'm almost concerned." "Don't be, I'm internally screaming. Externally, you're flawless." His hand hadn't left her back. Every time they moved, he guided her with subtle pressure, protection and possession in equal measure. She should have hated it. Instead, she found it strangely grounding. Then she saw the man watching them from across the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't currently twisted into something between suspicion and hostility. His gaze locked onto Lily with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. Serafino's hand tightened on her back. "Lorenzo Sante, one of Volpe's lieutenants. And a problem. Should we leave?" "No, that would confirm his suspicions. We stay, we perform, and we convince him you're exactly who we claim you are." Lorenzo crossed the room with deliberate purpose, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. He stopped directly in front of them, close enough to violate social convention. "Valentina," he said, his voice heavy with skepticism and an accent that suggested Roman streets rather than Roman villas. "It's been so long, I almost didn't recognize you." Lily's heart hammered, but she kept her face calm. "You are Valentina. You are sophisticated. You are unimpressed." "Lorenzo," she said coolly, hoping that was his first name and not some kind of title. "How unexpected." "Unexpected?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We grew up together, Cara. Surely you remember. Summer in Capri 6 years ago. You, me, your cousin Alessia, we went sailing." Lily had no idea if this was true or a test. Her mind raced through possibilities. Deny it and risk exposure if it was real. Confirm it and risk exposure if it was a trap. She did what she always did when faced with insufficient information. She deflected. 6 years is a lifetime ago, Lorenzo. I'm surprised you remember such trivial details. I barely remember last summer, let alone— You had a birthmark, Lorenzo interrupted, stepping closer. Right shoulder, shaped like a star. Do you still have it, Valentina? Or did that change along with everything else about you? The threat was clear. He was calling her out, publicly. Lily felt panic rising, but before she could respond, Serafino moved. He didn't just step forward. He inserted himself between them with the kind of controlled violence that made Lorenzo instinctively step back. Serafino's hand came up, not touching Lorenzo but close enough to be a warning. "Careful," Serafino said, his voice soft and lethal. "You're addressing someone under my protection. I suggest you remember that before you continue this interrogation." "I'm simply reacquainting myself with an old friend," Lorenzo said, but his confidence had faltered. "You're testing my patience." Serafino's accent thickened with barely controlled fury. and suggesting that I don't know who I've chosen to accompany me tonight. That's insulting, Lorenzo, to both of us." The crowd around them had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Serafino turned to Lily, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He looked at her like she was something precious, something worth defending, something his. "Dance with me," he said, not a request, a claim. He pulled her toward the dance floor before she could respond, his hand firm on hers, the other settling on her waist with possessive certainty. The orchestra was playing something slow and Italian. Puccini, maybe. Her brain supplied uselessly. "I don't know how to dance like this," Lily whispered urgently as he pulled her close. "Follow my lead." His voice was low, intimate. "And forgive me for what I'm about to do. What are you—" He kissed her. Not a gentle kiss, not a performance kiss. Something intense and desperate and real, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. His hand slid up her back, tangling in her hair, holding her against him like she might disappear if he let go. Lily's mind went blank. Every thought, every fear, every careful defense she'd built dissolved under the heat of his mouth on hers. She kissed him back without thinking, without permission, her hands finding his shoulders, his neck, pulling him closer even though they were already pressed together. The dance floor, the gala, Lorenzo, the entire performance, all of it vanished. There was only this. His mouth, his hands, the overwhelming presence of him surrounding her like smoke. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark and dangerous and completely unguarded. "There," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Does that answer your questions, Lorenzo? Or shall I make my claim even more explicit?" Lily could barely hear over the roaring in her ears. Her lips felt swollen. Her heart was trying to escape her chest. She stared up at Serafino and saw something in his eyes that terrified her, because it wasn't just performance. It wasn't just strategy. It was real. The car ride back to the estate was silent. Lily sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to process what had happened. The kiss. The way he'd defended her. The possessiveness in his voice that had sounded less like acting and more like truth. "You did well tonight," Serafino said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "You kissed me. It was necessary. To convince Lorenzo." "Was it?" She turned to look at him in the darkness of the car. Or was it something else? He didn't answer. Just stared out the window like the city lights held answers he couldn't find in her face. Back at the estate, Lily fled to her rooms before he could say anything else. She closed the door, leaned against it, and touched her lips where he'd kissed her. "This is a job," she told herself. "This is coercion. This is temporary." But her heart, traitorous, foolish thing, was already compromised beyond repair. Lily spent the next 2 days avoiding Serafino. This was surprisingly easy in an estate the size of a small university campus. She took her meals in her room, claimed exhaustion from the gala, and generally behaved like someone who hadn't been kissed senseless on a dance floor in front of half of Italian organized crime. The problem was that avoiding him didn't stop her from thinking about him. About the kiss. About the way he'd looked at her afterward, like something had shifted fundamentally between them. It was just a performance, she told herself for the 100th time while staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., strategic, necessary. It meant nothing. Her lips, which still remembered the exact pressure of his mouth, called her a liar. On the 3rd morning, Matteo appeared at her door with a summons that wasn't really a summons. "The boss wants to see you. Now." Lily found Serafino in what she'd come to think of as his war room, a secure office filled with computers, maps, and the kind of technology that suggested his business was significantly more sophisticated than she'd imagined. He stood over a table covered in photographs and documents, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, human, still devastatingly attractive, which was frankly unfair. "You've been avoiding me," he said without looking up. I've been recovering from being paraded around as someone else and then kissed in front of 100 witnesses. It's been exhausting. The kiss was necessary. So you've said. Lily crossed her arms. Why am I here, Serafino? He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. Because we have a problem, and I believe you might be the only person who can solve it. He gestured to the photographs spread across the table. Lily approached cautiously, her curiosity overriding her determination to maintain emotional distance. The photos showed what looked like a vault door, but not just any vault. The locking mechanism was covered in symbols that made her academic brain sit up and take notice. What am I looking at? She asked. Volpe's safe house, specifically the vault where he keeps the ledger I need. Serafino pointed to the symbols. My people have tried everything. Standard combinations, electronic bypasses, brute force. Nothing works. The mechanism is coded somehow, but none of my specialists can decipher it. Lily leaned closer, studying the images. The symbols were definitely not random. They had structure, pattern, meaning. Her pulse quickened with the same excitement she felt when encountering a particularly interesting manuscript puzzle. These aren't modern security codes, she said slowly. These are alchemical symbols, Renaissance era, probably based on Paracelsian notation mixed with... She grabbed another photo, examined it more closely. Medieval botanical classification systems. Serafino stared at her. You can read this? Read it? I wrote my undergraduate thesis on exactly this kind of symbolic language. Alchemists used botanical codes to hide their formulas from the church. Each symbol represents a plant, which corresponds to a classical element, which maps to a number. She looked up at him, excitement overriding caution. This isn't a lock, it's a puzzle, a riddle written in a dead language that approximately 12 people in the world can still interpret. Can you solve it? Lily studied the photos again, her mind already working through the symbols. Hellebore for Saturn, corresponding to lead, numerical value 7. Deadly nightshade for Mars. Iron, numerical value 5. The pattern was emerging, beautiful and complex. Possibly, she said, but I'd need to see it in person. Photographs don't capture everything. There might be weathering, patina, context clues that would help confirm my translation. In person means you'd have to come on the mission. Yes. Serafino was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. That's not acceptable, it's too dangerous. Then you're not getting into that vault. Lily met his eyes. Your people tried brute force and it didn't work. This requires precision, context, knowledge. It requires me. I can take better photos. You can solve it from here. And if I'm wrong? If I need to adjust my interpretation based on something I can only see in person? She leaned forward. You said you needed that ledger, that it's critical to stopping Volpe. Well, I'm your best chance, your only chance, of getting it. So either you trust my expertise, or you accept that you're going to fail. His eyes narrowed. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying being useful for something other than being paraded around as a fake fiancé. Yes. She paused. And honestly, breaking into a safe house to solve a Renaissance alchemical puzzle is significantly more interesting than anything I had planned for this month. Despite the tension, Serafino's lips quirked. You have a strange definition of interesting. I'm a book restorer. We're all a little unhinged. He studied her for a long moment, and Lily could see the calculation behind his eyes, weighing risk against necessity, control against trust. If you come, he said finally, you follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. You solve the puzzle, we get the ledger, we leave. Understood? Understood. And Lily? His voice dropped lower. If something goes wrong, if there's danger, you run. You don't try to help. You don't try to be brave. You save yourself. That's an order. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. Why do you care? Because you're valuable, he said. But the way he looked at her suggested he meant something more than strategic value. They left at midnight. Lily wore all black, clothes that Julia had provided with the grim efficiency of someone used to outfitting people for crimes. Serafino drove, with 2 other men following in a second vehicle. The safe house was in the hills outside the city, a modern fortress disguised as a luxury villa. Volpe uses it for storage, Serafino explained as they approached. Documents, valuables, things he wants kept separate from his main operations. Security is minimal because he believes the vault is impenetrable. Until tonight, Lily said. Until tonight, he agreed. They parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot. The property was dark, quiet. Serafino moved with the kind of fluid silence that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times. Lily tried to match his movements, feeling clumsy and too loud despite her best efforts. They bypassed the main entrance, entering through what Serafino called a security weakness, but looked like a standard window to Lily. Inside, the villa was sterile, impersonal, a storage facility pretending to be a home. Serafino led her through darkened hallways, his hand occasionally touching her back to guide her. They encountered no guards, no alarms. It felt too easy. "Where is everyone?" Lily whispered. Volpe's confident in his vault. Most of his security is perimeter-based. But Serafino's tone suggested he was also uneasy with the lack of resistance. The vault was in a basement level, behind a door that Serafino's people had already unlocked remotely. The room beyond was small, dominated by the vault door that Lily had seen in the photographs. Up close, it was even more impressive. The symbols weren't just carved. They were inlaid with different metals, each one corresponding to the alchemical association. Silver for Luna, gold for Sol, iron for Mars. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed. "It's a lock," Serafino said. "Can you open it?" Lily approached carefully, her fingers hovering over the symbols without touching. "Give me a moment. I need to read the full sequence." She studied the pattern, her mind translating symbols to plants to elements to numbers. The sequence was elegant, complex, designed by someone who understood both alchemy and security. "It's a date," she said finally, encoded in botanical alchemical notation. Specifically, she traced the symbols with her finger. October 31st, 1538, the date Paracelsus died. "You're certain?" 90%. The remaining 10% is whether Volpe used the Julian or Gregorian calendar, but given the Renaissance context, I'd bet on Julian. She entered the corresponding numbers into the mechanism. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like exhaling, the vault door unsealed. "Brilliant," Serafino murmured. Inside, the vault was larger than expected, lined with shelves and filing cabinets. The ledger Serafino wanted was immediately visible, a leather-bound book sitting on a central pedestal like a museum display. But Lily's attention was drawn to something else. A folder, sitting slightly apart from the others, with botanical illustrations on the cover, Renaissance-style drawings of deadly nightshade and hemlock, plants associated with death and poison. "Serafino," she said quietly, "look at this." She opened the folder with careful hands. Inside were documents, plans, schedules, photographs. She couldn't read all the Italian, but she understood enough. Understood the blueprints of Serafino's estate. Understood the timetables that corresponded to tonight's date. Understood the notations about eliminating the problem permanently. "It's a trap," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This whole thing. He knew you'd come for the ledger. He's been waiting." Serafino was beside her instantly, reading over her shoulder. His expression darkened with each page. "How long do we have?" he asked. "I don't know, but these plans, they're not just about tonight. They're about destroying everything. Your organization, your estate, you." Lily looked at the documents in her hands. Evidence of a plot that went far beyond a simple rivalry, evidence that could be used to stop Volpe or to expose Serafino, evidence that represented her freedom if she wanted it. She could take this to the authorities, could use it as leverage to escape, could finally get back to her real life. Instead, she handed it to Serafino. "We need to go," she said. "Now. And you need to see all of this." He stared at her, and in his dark eyes she saw surprise, understanding, and something that looked almost like wonder. "You could have used this to escape," he said quietly. "I could have." She met his gaze. "But you were right. We're partners now, whether I like it or not." Something shifted in his expression, softened and intensified simultaneously. He took the documents, but his other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "Lily Summers," he said, and her name in his accented voice sounded like a prayer. "You are far more dangerous than any ledger." "We need to leave," she repeated, but her voice was unsteady. "Yes." But he didn't move, just stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You belong to me now," he said, "not because I took you, but because you chose to stay." Before Lily could respond, before she could process what that meant, alarms began to blare throughout the building. The trap had been sprung, and they were standing right in the center of it. The alarms were deafening. Serafino's hand closed around Lily's wrist, pulling her away from the vault with controlled urgency. "Move, now." They ran. Not the elegant, choreographed running from movies, desperate, stumbling, running through corridors that suddenly seemed like a maze. Behind them, Lily could hear voices shouting in Italian, the sound of boots on marble, doors slamming open. "I thought you said minimal security," she gasped. "I was wrong." Serafino's voice was tight with fury. At himself, at the situation, she couldn't tell. The vault was the trap. Opening it triggered everything. They burst through a side door into the night air. The two men who'd accompanied them materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn, faces grim. Rapid Italian passed between them, too fast for Lily to follow. But the tone was clear. "We need to leave immediately." They made it to the vehicles as lights flooded the safe house behind them. Serafino pushed Lily into the car, his body shielding hers, then threw himself into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. "Keep your head down," he commanded. Lily ducked as they accelerated down the private road, gravel spraying. She heard sounds that might have been gunfire, might have been something else, didn't want to know which. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The folder of documents was pressed against her chest where she'd instinctively grabbed it. They didn't stop driving until they were back in the city, lost in the maze of late-night traffic. Only then did Serafino's grip on the steering wheel loosen slightly. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the road. "No." "Are you?" "No." The single word carried the weight of everything unsaid. "But we could have been. You could have been." Back at the estate, Serafino disappeared into his office with the ledger and documents, leaving Lily with Matteo and instructions to stay in her rooms until further notice. She lasted approximately 40 minutes before the adrenaline crash hit, followed by the inevitable question, "What the hell am I doing?" She'd just broken into a Mafia safe house, had solved a Renaissance alchemical puzzle, had discovered assassination plots, had chosen, actively, consciously, to side with a criminal instead of using evidence to escape. "You're losing your mind," she told herself. "Stockholm Syndrome, that's what this is. You're identifying with your captor because your brain is trying to survive, but it didn't feel like survival. It felt like choice." She was still wrestling with that thought when her door opened without knocking. Serafino entered, his expression dark and closed off, every trace of the softness from the vault gone. "We need to talk," he said. "You could try knocking." "This is my house, I don't knock." He closed the door behind him. "What happened tonight was unacceptable." Lily stood, defensive. "I solved your puzzle. I got you into the vault. I found evidence that Volpe was planning to kill you. You're welcome, by the way. You put yourself in danger." His voice was cold, controlled, the voice of the man who'd first interrogated her, not the man who'd touched her face in the vault. "That was not part of our agreement. Our agreement was that I'd help you get the ledger, which I did. By being present at an active crime scene. By nearly getting caught. By—" He stopped, jaw tight. by making me responsible for your safety in a situation where I couldn't guarantee it. I made that choice, not you. You made a foolish choice." He moved closer, and now she could see the fury beneath his control. "You're an asset, Lily, a valuable one. But you're not trained for field work, you're not prepared for violence, and tonight you could have been killed because I allowed sentiment to override strategy." The word sentiment hit her like a slap. "Is that what you're calling it? What would you call it?" "I don't know, Serafino. You tell me. Because one minute you're looking at me like I'm something precious, and the next you're calling me an asset." Her voice rose. "Which is it? Am I a person to you or just another piece on your chessboard?" He stopped, visibly struggling. "You're a complication I didn't plan for." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." They stood facing each other, the air between them crackling with unresolved tension and everything they weren't saying. Then Serafino's phone rang. He answered it in Italian, his expression growing darker with each passing second. The conversation was brief, terse. When he ended the call, he looked at Lily with something that might have been regret. "There's a problem," he said quietly. "Another one?" "Your friend Mia filed a missing person report 3 days ago. The FBI has taken an interest." Lily's stomach dropped. "What?" "An Agent Reyes approached her yesterday, asking questions about your disappearance, about your work at the museum, about whether you had any connections to—" He paused. "To people like me." "Mia doesn't know anything about you. She knows you disappeared. She knows your cover story about the European consulting position doesn't make sense." Serafino's voice was flat, emotionless. "The FBI is building a case. They believe you're either a victim or a witness. Either way, you're now a federal interest." Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. Mia. Of course Mia had filed a report. Of course she'd been worried. Lily had been so focused on surviving her own situation that she hadn't fully considered what her disappearance meant for the people who cared about her. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means keeping you here has become significantly more dangerous. For both of us." Serafino moved to the window, his back to her. "The FBI will be watching your apartment, your workplace, your known associates. If they have any evidence linking you to me, they don't. Yet." He turned to face her. "But they will. The gala was photographed, social media, security cameras. It's only a matter of time before they identify you as Valentina Volpe and realize you're actually Lily Summers. When that happens, they'll have everything they need to bring me down." "So what are you going to do?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Kill me to protect yourself?" Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, fury, she couldn't tell. "I'm going to move you. Tonight. Somewhere remote. Completely off-grid, somewhere the FBI can't find you until this is resolved." "You mean, hide me? I mean protect you? By locking me away in some isolated safe house?" Lily stood, anger overriding fear. "For how long, Serafino? Weeks? Months? Years? When exactly does this end?" "When it's safe. It's never going to be safe. Don't you see? This is your life. Danger, violence, running from consequences. But it's not mine. I won't disappear completely just to protect your criminal empire." "You don't have a choice." His voice hardened back into the cold control she hated. "I'm making this decision for you." "No." The word came out fierce, final. "You don't get to do that anymore." Lily crossed the room until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough to see the war happening behind his dark eyes. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're going to use your resources, your money, your connections, your obviously very expensive lawyers to handle this legitimately. Make the FBI investigation go away through legal channels. Clear my name. Let me return to my life. That's not possible. Make it possible. You keep telling me how powerful you are, how much control you have. Prove it. Not through violence or hiding, but through the legitimate channels you claim to have access to." And if I refuse? Lily took a breath, knowing this was the edge, the point of no return. Then I walk out of here tomorrow morning and turn myself in to Agent Reyes. I tell them everything. The kidnapping, the fake identity, the vault, all of it. I become the witness they're looking for. Serafino's expression was unreadable. I can't let you do that. Then you'll have to kill me, because those are your only two options now. Help me legitimately, or lose me permanently. But what you can't do is keep me locked away like some guilty secret while you pretend the outside world doesn't exist. You're asking me to dismantle everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose. Lily's voice softened slightly. Choose whether I'm just an asset to be managed or whether I'm something more. Because if I'm more, if what happened in that vault, on that dance floor, in your library meant anything, then you'll find a way to make this right. And if I can't, then at least I'll know the truth, that this was always just a transaction to you. Serafino stared at her, and Lily watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to identify. Fury, fear, frustration, and something that looked dangerously close to heartbreak. You're asking the impossible, he said quietly. You've built an empire on doing the impossible. This should be easy by comparison. This is different. Why? Because it requires you to be vulnerable? To actually trust someone instead of just controlling them? She moved closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. I stayed, Serafino. When I could have run, when I could have used that evidence to escape, I chose to stay. I chose you. Now you have to choose whether I'm worth fighting for, really fighting for, not just hiding away. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Lily could see the war happening behind his eyes, the man he'd been raised to be fighting against the man he might become. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. If I do this, if I try to handle this legitimately, it will cost me. Power, connections, leverage I've spent years building. Some of my operations will have to be exposed, sacrificed. People will see it as weakness, or they'll see it as strength, as evolution. You don't understand my world. Then explain it to me. Stop trying to control everything and actually let me in. Lily's voice cracked slightly. I'm so tired of being a captive, Serafino. Either make me a partner, a real one, with choices and agency, or let me go. He reached out slowly, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was. What if I can't do either? Then we're both trapped. And eventually, one of us will break. His thumb brushed her cheek. You're going to destroy me, Lily Summers. Or save you, depending on your perspective. He laughed, a broken sound, painful and real. How did I end up here? Being lectured about morality by the woman I kidnapped? You grabbed the wrong girl, remember? This is what you get for poor target identification. Despite everything, his lips curved into something almost like a smile. The wrong girl, he repeated softly. Except you're not, are you? You're exactly right. That's the problem. So what are you going to do? Serafino was silent for a long moment, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her skin. I'm going to call my lawyer, he said finally, and pray that you're worth the empire I'm about to sacrifice. The lawyer arrived at dawn. His name was Antonio Marchesi, and he looked exactly like what Lily imagined a mafia lawyer would look like. Impeccably tailored suit, silver hair, eyes that had seen every possible variation of human depravity and remained unimpressed by all of it. He spent 3 hours in Serafino's office, speaking in rapid Italian that occasionally rose in volume to suggest disagreement. Lily waited in the library, pretending to read a first edition she was too anxious to actually focus on. When Serafino finally emerged, he looked exhausted. Not physically tired, something deeper, like he'd spent the night wrestling with parts of himself he usually kept buried. Marchesi says it's possible, he said without preamble. Difficult, expensive, and requiring significant concessions on my part, But possible. Lily set down the book. What kind of concessions? The kind where I sacrifice pieces of my organization to protect you. Operations I've built over years. Leverage I've cultivated. People who will see this as weakness and move against me. He moved to the window, his back to her. The kind where I fundamentally change what I am. Or become what you could be. You make it sound noble. It's not. It's survival. He turned to face her. But there's a complication. The FBI wants to interview you. Agent Reyes has been pushing Mia for information, and she's starting to crack under pressure. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. Lily's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means you need to surface. Carefully, strategically, make contact, prove you're alive and well, give them just enough to satisfy their concerns without revealing anything that could be used against me, against us. You want me to meet with the FBI? I want you to handle the FBI the way you handled that vault, with precision and intelligence. His dark eyes held hers. Marchese has outlined what you can and can't say legally. But ultimately, you'll be in a room with a federal agent who wants to use you to destroy me. I need to know you can handle that. You're asking if you can trust me. I'm asking if you can protect yourself while protecting us both. Lily stood, moving closer to him. What happened to I make decisions for you? To controlling everything? That was before you gave me an ultimatum that forced me to acknowledge you're not someone I can control. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. You wanted to be a partner. This is what partnership looks like. Trust, risk, the terrifying possibility that you'll make choices I can't predict. And if I make the wrong choice, then we both pay the price. The weight of that settled over her. This wasn't just about her freedom anymore. It was about his entire organization, his future, possibly his life. When? She asked. Today. Marchese has arranged for you to retrieve research notes from your university lab. Agent Reyes will be there. He's been watching the location, waiting for you to surface. Serafino's jaw tightened. You'll have 2 hours. If you're not back by then, I'm coming for you. With guns blazing? If necessary. That would somewhat defeat the purpose of handling this legitimately. Lily. His voice was serious now, all trace of humor gone. If they try to hold you, if they threaten you, if you feel unsafe for even a moment, you call me. Immediately. I don't care about consequences or exposure. I will get you out. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in her chest. I'll be fine. You don't know that. Neither do you, but you're trusting me anyway. She reached out, her hand finding his. That's what makes this different from captivity. His fingers closed around hers, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. The university felt like visiting a past life. Lily walked through familiar hallways wearing clothes that cost more than a semester's tuition, accompanied by Matteo, who waited in the car with instructions to observe and report any federal presence. She had 2 hours, a burner phone in her pocket, and a recording device that Marchese had assured her was completely legal as long as she was party to the conversation. The conservation lab was exactly as she'd left it. Slightly chaotic, smelling of old paper and preservation chemicals, her workspace still cluttered with the manuscript she'd been restoring before her life had imploded. She'd been there for maybe 10 minutes, actually collecting notes because the cover story needed to be legitimate, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Agent Reyes was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, sharp suit, tired eyes that suggested he'd been working this case hard. He appeared in the doorway with the casual confidence of someone who had every legal right to be there. Lily Summers, he said, not a question. I'm Special Agent Marco Reyes, FBI. I'd like to talk to you about your recent whereabouts. Lily's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. I'm sorry, do I need to talk to you? Am I under arrest? No, but your friend Mia Chen filed a missing person report. We've been concerned about you. As you can see, I'm not missing. I've been working a private consulting contract in Europe. I sent Mia several texts explaining the situation. texts that were uncharacteristically brief. Reyes stepped into the lab, his eyes scanning the space with professional assessment. Mia says they didn't sound like you, that you would never take a position without telling her in detail, that something felt wrong. Mia worries. It's sweet but unnecessary. Is it? He moved closer, his voice softening into something that might have been concern. Because from where I'm standing, a young woman with no criminal connections suddenly disappears, sends suspicious texts, and then reappears looking, forgive me, significantly more expensive than a graduate student stipend would allow. Lily glanced down at her clothes, cashmere and designer labels she couldn't have afforded in a lifetime. The consulting position paid well. What company? I signed an NDA, very strict confidentiality agreements. Convenient. Reyes pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. This was taken 4 nights ago at a charity gala in the city. That's you, isn't it? With Serafino Greco. The photo showed them on the dance floor, his hand on her waist, her face tilted up toward his. It was intimate, undeniable, and completely incriminating. I attended a social function, Lily said carefully. That's not illegal. Serafino Greco is a person of interest in multiple federal investigations, organized crime, money laundering, racketeering. He's not someone an innocent graduate student accidentally meets at a party. Maybe I'm not as innocent as you think. Reyes's expression sharpened. Are you telling me you're involved in criminal activity? I'm telling you that my personal life is none of your business, unless you're charging me with something. Lily met his eyes. Am I being charged with anything, Agent Reyes? Not yet. But if you're being coerced, if Greco has threatened you or forced you into any situation against your will, we can protect you. I don't need protection. The words came out fiercer than she intended. I made choices. Maybe they're not choices you'd make, but they're mine. I'm an adult, I'm not in danger, and I haven't committed any crimes. You're sure about that? Reyes leaned against her workstation. Because associating with known criminals, failing to report crimes you may have witnessed, lying to federal agents, those are all things that could become charges very quickly. Lily felt a flash of genuine anger. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. His voice softened again. Lily, I've seen this pattern before. Women who get involved with men like Greco. They think it's exciting, romantic, different from their normal lives, and then one day they're in too deep. They're complicit in things they never imagined, and they can't get out. I don't want that to happen to you. That's very touching, but you don't know anything about my situation. Then explain it to me. Lily took a breath, channeling every lesson Marchese had drilled into her. I'm a private citizen. I'm not under arrest. I haven't been subpoenaed, and unless you have a warrant or are charging me with something specific, this conversation is voluntary, which means I can end it whenever I want. Reyes's expression tightened. You've been coached. I've been educated. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone, showed him the recording app that had been running since he entered. I'm also documenting this conversation, which is completely legal in this state since I'm a party to it. So unless you want your threats and intimidation tactics on record, I suggest you make your actual questions very clear. For the first time, Reyes looked uncertain. This isn't how innocent people behave. This is how people who understand their rights behave. Lily moved toward the door. Now, I have work to do. If you want to speak to me again, you can contact my attorney, Antonio Marchese. I'm sure you know the name. She walked out before he could respond. Her legs shaking but her pace steady. Matteo fell into step beside her in the hallway, his presence solid and reassuring. Well? He asked quietly. I think I just made an FBI agent very unhappy. Good. The boss will be pleased. Serafino was waiting when she returned, not in his office, but in the entrance hall, like he'd been pacing there for the entire 2 hours. You're early, he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. I'm efficient. Lily held up her phone. Also, I have the entire conversation recorded, including Agent Reyes making several statements that Marchese will probably find very useful. Serafino stared at her. You recorded it? You hired me to solve a Renaissance alchemical puzzle? Did you think I couldn't handle basic evidence gathering? She moved past him toward the office. Come on. You need to hear this. They listened to the recording together, Serafino, Marchese via speakerphone, and two other lawyers whose names Lily didn't catch. When it finished, Marchese let out a low whistle. This is good, he said. This is very good. Agent Reyes overstepped significantly. The implied threats without formal charges, the attempt at coercion, the lack of proper Miranda warnings despite clearly treating her as a suspect. We can use this. How? Serafino asked. We file a formal complaint about the investigation's conduct. We demonstrate that Miss Summers is being harassed, not protected. We force the FBI to either produce actual evidence of criminal activity or back off, and based on this recording, they don't have evidence. They have suspicions and bad photographs. What about the gala? Lily asked. The photos of us together? You attended a public event. That's not a crime. Yes, Mr. Greco is a person of interest in various investigations, but being seen with him isn't proof of criminal involvement. Marchese's voice was confident now, energized. They're fishing, Miss Summers, and you just forced them to reveal they have nothing solid. Serafino was silent, staring at the phone like it contained miracles instead of recordings. This changes things, Marchese continued. With this evidence of overreach, I can approach the investigation with leverage, negotiate a resolution, but it will require Mr. Greco to make certain adjustments to his operations, to demonstrate good faith. What kind of adjustments? Serafino's voice was flat. The kind we discussed, legitimate businesses coming to the forefront. Certain activities ceasing permanently, financial transparency in specific areas. You'll maintain your empire, but it will be a different empire. Cleaner, legal. Serafino looked at Lily, and she saw the war still happening behind his eyes. Everything he'd built, everything he'd become, being asked to fundamentally change. Do it, he said finally. Mr. Greco, I need to be clear about what this means. I said do it, Antonio. Serafino's voice was firm. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to sacrifice, arrange it. After the lawyers disconnected, they sat in silence. Lily watched Serafino process what he'd just agreed to, the dismantling of parts of his organization, the exposure of others, the fundamental shift in power dynamics that would ripple through his world. You're quiet, she said finally. I'm realizing that you just did in 2 hours what I couldn't do in 15 years. He looked at her, and his expression was unguarded in a way she'd never seen. You fought a battle without firing a single shot. You protected both of us using nothing but intelligence and courage. And a recording app. And a recording app, he agreed, almost smiling. You're extraordinary, Lily Summers. Do you know that? I'm just a grad student who got kidnapped. No. He stood, moving to where she sat, kneeling down so they were eye level. You're the woman who forced me to choose between the empire I inherited and the future I never knew I wanted. And I'm choosing you. Whatever it costs, however it changes me, I'm choosing you. His hands cupped her face, and Lily saw in his dark eyes everything he was too proud or too scared to say: fear, hope, devotion, terror at his own vulnerability. You're going to regret this, she whispered. Probably. His thumb brushed her lower lip. But regret is better than losing you. When he kissed her, it was different from the dance floor. Slower, deeper, a promise instead of a performance. Lily kissed him back, her hands finding his shoulders, pulling him closer, and felt the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of falling with no idea where she'd land. They were partners now, truly, completely, dangerously partners, and there was no going back. Chapter 8. The Price of Freedom. The waterfront at midnight was exactly the kind of place where bad things happened in movies. Lily stood next to Serafino's car, the cold wind off the water cutting through her jacket, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. "You don't have to be here," Serafino said for the third time in the past hour. "Matteo can deliver the ledger. You can wait at the estate where it's safe." "We've been over this." Lily pulled her jacket tighter. "Volpe asked for you specifically. If you show up without me, the woman he thinks is Valentina, he'll know something's wrong. This only works if we both play our parts." "I don't like it." "You don't have to like it. You just have to trust that I know what I'm doing." Serafino looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the scattered lights from the industrial buildings around them. "You've become disturbingly comfortable with criminal negotiations." "I've had a good teacher." She paused. "A morally questionable teacher, but technically proficient." Despite the tension, his lips curved slightly. "You're making jokes." "That means you're terrified." "I contain multitudes." He reached out, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "If anything goes wrong, I run. You've told me approximately 50 times. I need to hear you say you understand. If Volpe brings more men than expected, if he tries anything, if the situation deteriorates in any way, you run to Matteo. He'll get you out." "And leave you?" "Yes." His voice was firm. "This is not negotiable, Lily. You are not sacrificing yourself for a ledger or for me. That's an order." "You can't order me around anymore. We're partners, remember? Partners who have hierarchies in life-threatening situations." His hand tightened on hers. "Promise me." Lily looked at their joined hands, then back up at his face, at the fear he was trying so hard to control. "I promise, but only if you promise the same. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. We do this smart, not brave." "Agreed." Headlights appeared in the distance, moving slowly along the waterfront road. Serafino's entire body tensed, his free hand moving subtly toward the weapon she knew he carried. "That's them," he said quietly. "Stay behind me. Let me handle the initial exchange." The car, a black SUV that looked like every villain's vehicle in every crime movie, pulled to a stop 20 feet away. The engine cut off. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the doors opened. Marco Volpe emerged first, and Lily recognized him from the intelligence photos Serafino had shown her. Mid-40s, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if it wasn't currently twisted with barely controlled fury. 3 men flanked him, large, armed, professional. More than Serafino had predicted. "Greco," Volpe called out, his voice carrying across the empty space between them. "You brought my fiancé to our meeting. How considerate." Lily felt Serafino's hand twitch, but his voice remained controlled. "I brought Valentina because she wanted to see you one last time, to tell you herself why she chose me." Volpe's eyes fixed on Lily, cold and assessing. "Is that true, Cara? You wanted to see me?" Lily stepped forward slightly, channeling every lesson Julia had taught her about being Valentina. Confident, sophisticated, completely unimpressed. "I wanted to understand what I was giving up," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Turns out, not much." Volpe's expression darkened. "Careful, Valentina. You were mine first. That means something in our world. I was never yours. My father arranged a contract, not a relationship." She moved closer to Serafino, a deliberate choice. "Serafino offered me something you never could, respect. He offered you a fantasy, a romantic delusion." Volpe took a step forward. "But fantasies end, Cara, and when this one does, you'll remember who you really belong to." "The ledger," Serafino interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's why we're here. I have what you want. Let's conclude our business and part ways." Volpe's smile was cold. "Yes, the ledger. The one you stole from my safe house after triggering every alarm I'd carefully set." He gestured, and one of his men produced a tablet showing security footage. "Did you really think I wouldn't know? That I wouldn't see you and your little book restorer breaking into my vault? Lily's stomach dropped. He knew. He'd known from the beginning. So this isn't an exchange, Serafino said quietly. It's a trap. It's justice. Volpe's men spread out, hands moving toward weapons. You took something of mine. Valentina, my ledger, my reputation. Tonight I take everything from you. The moment crystallized, violence hanging in the air like a held breath. Then Lily heard it, distant at first but growing louder. Sirens. Volpe heard it too. His expression shifted from triumph to confusion to dawning fury. What did you do? He hissed. I made a phone call, Lily said, pulling out her phone to show the screen. A call log showing a number she'd dialed exactly 30 minutes ago. To the Financial Crimes Division of the NYPD. You see that ledger you're so desperate to retrieve? It contains detailed records of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. All very illegal, all with your name attached. I also may have sent copies to the FBI, the IRS, and a particularly ambitious assistant district attorney who's been looking for a career-making case. She smiled, and it felt dangerous. You wanted your ledger back, Marco? Congratulations. The authorities are very interested in discussing it with you. Police cars flooded the waterfront, lights strobing red and blue across the pavement. Volpe's men froze, caught between fight and flight, ultimately choosing neither as officers emerged with weapons drawn. Marco Volpe, a voice called through a megaphone. You're under arrest. Put your hands where we can see them. Volpe stared at Lily with pure hatred. You think this changes anything? You think legal charges stop men like me? No, Lily said. But they slow you down long enough for the rest to catch up. Your associates, your partners, everyone who's been waiting for you to show weakness, they'll see you in handcuffs and realize you're not untouchable anymore. Serafino's hand found her back, steady and grounding. Officers moved in, and Volpe's men surrendered without resistance. Volpe himself was last, allowing the handcuffs with the kind of cold dignity that suggested he was already planning his next move. As they led him away, he looked back at Lily. You're not Valentina, he said quietly. I don't know who you are, but you're not her. And when I get out, you won't, Lily interrupted. That ledger is remarkably detailed. You'll be lucky if you see daylight before you're 70. They watched until the police cars disappeared, taking Volpe and his men with them. The waterfront fell quiet again, just the sound of water lapping against old pilings and the distant hum of the city. You had me bring the ledger to a police sting, Serafino said finally. Yes. Without telling me. I wasn't sure you'd agree. He was silent for a long moment. You're right, I wouldn't have. He turned to face her. I would have wanted to handle it my way, violence, permanent solutions, the way I've always handled threats. And now I'm watching a man I've considered my enemy for years being arrested by legitimate authorities, facing legitimate consequences, while I stand here completely untouched by the fallout. He laughed, a sound of genuine amazement. You did it again. You fought my battle with a mind instead of a gun. It's not over, Lily warned. He'll have lawyers. There'll be investigations. You might still be questioned. Let them question me. Marchese has been preparing for this, and thanks to your FBI recording and this, he gestured at the now empty waterfront, we have proof that we're cooperating with authorities, not evading them. Matteo approached from where he'd been strategically positioned. Boss, we should leave before they decide to question us after all. Agreed. Serafino kept his hand on Lily's back as they moved toward the car. Lily, in the car. We'll debrief at the estate. But before she could move, he stopped, pulling her back to face him. What you did tonight, he said quietly, using Volpe's own criminality against him, bringing legitimate authorities instead of criminal violence. You gave me something I didn't know I could have. What's that? A way out. Not from my organization, but from the inevitability of violence being the only solution. His hand came up to cup her face. You're changing me, Lily Summers. Fundamentally, terrifyingly changing me. Is that a good thing? Ask me in a year, when I'm running legitimate businesses and attending charity galas where I'm not secretly planning anyone's murder. He smiled, and it was real, vulnerable, almost young. You're either saving me or destroying everything I've built, possibly both. Partners in chaos, Lily said. Partners in evolution. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. Let's go home. Back at the estate, Lily stood at the window of her rooms. Except they didn't feel like a cage anymore. They felt like a choice. Serafino found her there an hour later, appearing in the doorway with 2 glasses of wine and an expression that suggested he'd been thinking as hard as she had. Marchese called, he said, offering her a glass. The FBI is closing their investigation. Agent Reyes has been reprimanded for overreach, and with Volpe's arrest, the pressure on my organization has shifted. Shifted how? Toward legitimacy. Apparently, being the person who helped bring down a major criminal enterprise earns a certain amount of goodwill, even if everyone suspects my motivations were personal rather than civic-minded. Were they? Personal? He moved to stand beside her at the window. I told Volpe arrested because his obsession with revenge made him sloppy, because his need to possess you, to possess Valentina, blinded him to the larger game. He paused. But honestly? I wanted him gone because he threatened you, because every moment he was free was a moment you were in danger. So yes, Lily, it was personal. They stood in silence, looking out at the estate grounds lit by subtle landscape lighting. What happens now? Lily asked quietly. Now we figure out what our partnership looks like when it's not defined by crisis. He turned to face her. You've fulfilled your month. Actually, you've exceeded every expectation I had. The FBI investigation is resolved. Volpe is neutralized. You're free to leave if you want. The words hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid. And if I don't want to leave? Then we figure out what comes next, together, as equals, as partners. His voice dropped lower. As whatever we're becoming that doesn't have a name yet. Lily looked at him, at this dangerous, complicated, surprisingly vulnerable man who'd kidnapped her and then let her change him. I have conditions, she said. Of course you do. The legitimate business transformation isn't optional, it's mandatory. I'm not spending my life waiting for violence to catch up with us. Agreed. Marchese is already implementing changes. And I need freedom. Real freedom. Not surveillance disguised as protection. You'll have it, though I reserve the right to worry. And, she took a breath, I need to know this is real. Not Stockholm Syndrome, not proximity, not just chemistry born from shared trauma. Serafino set down his wineglass and took both her hands in his. Lily, you've had a dozen opportunities to leave, to turn me in, to use information against me. You've stayed not because you're captive, but because you chose to. That makes this the most real thing I've ever experienced. I grabbed the wrong girl, Lily said softly. No. He pulled her closer. You grabbed exactly the right one. She just wasn't who we expected. When he kissed her this time, it felt like a beginning instead of a conclusion. Like the first page of a story they'd write together, with no idea where it would lead but willing to find out anyway. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Inside, 2 people who shouldn't have worked found a way to make partnership from chaos, love from coercion, and future from impossible odds. The wrong girl had become the right woman, and the Mafia boss had become something he'd never imagined, a man worth saving. Lily stood in the transformed warehouse that now housed the Greco-Cultural Heritage Foundation, 4 floors of meticulously restored space in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. What had once stored Serafino's questionable imports now contained climate-controlled vaults, state-of-the-art restoration labs, and a team of 12 conservators, 3 archivists, and rotating graduate students who looked at Lily with reverence. As Dr. Summers, she had become everything she'd dreamed of academically and more. When graduate student Maya approached nervously about a damaged 16th-century herbal, Lily didn't just approve the restoration, she invited Maya to lead the project. "Someone gave me a chance once when I was a terrified grad student," Lily explained. "I'm just paying it forward." Serafino, watching from her office doorway in his perfectly tailored suit, observed, "You're good at this. The mentoring, the leadership, all the things you claimed you'd be terrible at." Over 2 years, he had carefully cultivated a new reputation as a reformed businessman focused on cultural preservation, though the truth remained more complicated. He brought news from the board meeting, funding secured for expansion, and more significantly, the Metropolitan Museum wanted to partner with them, specifically requesting Lily as lead conservator. Her former employer, who probably still had AWOL grad student next to her name, now recognized her as one of the premier manuscript conservators in the country. "That's everything I ever wanted academically," Lily said, stunned. "You've built something extraordinary here," Serafino replied. "This is your empire." "Our empire," she corrected. "Partnership, remember?" They had fallen into rhythms over 2 years, patterns that felt almost domestic despite their strange beginning. Lily kept her city apartment for appearances, but spent most nights at the estate. They built something that increasingly looked like a life. That evening, Serafino took her to the foundation's main vault, dismissing even security. In the climate-controlled basement, surrounded by their most valuable acquisitions, he led her to his personal collection and pulled out a familiar leather-bound volume. Volpe's ledger. "You kept it," Lily said. "I restored it," he replied, showing her the professionally conserved pages. With Marchese's help, it had become evidence that put Volpe away for 23 years. "I thought it should be preserved. As a reminder of where we started, of the chaos that brought us together, and of what we built from that chaos." He pulled out a small box. "Before you panic," he said, vulnerability evident in his voice, "I need to say something. 2 years ago, I kidnapped you because my men grabbed the wrong girl. I kept you because I was arrogant enough to think I could control the situation. You spent 2 years proving that control was an illusion. You changed me. Fundamentally, permanently. You forced me to evolve or lose you, and I chose evolution because losing you was unthinkable." The box contained a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds, her birthstone, designed specifically for her. But then he pulled out something else, a key on a silver chain. "This is the real proposal," he said, holding up the master key to the vault. "Equal access, equal authority, equal partnership in every sense. I'm not asking you to belong to me, Lily. I'm asking you to build a life with me where we belong to each other, entirely, completely, on terms we define together." Through tears, Lily took the key. "You made me cry with a vault key. That's very on-brand for us." She accepted without hesitation. "We've moved past problematic beginnings into something real, something chosen, something worth keeping." 6 months later, they married in the estate's garden on a perfect spring morning. Mia stood as maid of honor with a knowing smile. Matteo served as best man, nearly silent but possibly approving. Marchese officiated with legal precision that made the ceremony both romantic and contractually sound. Lily wore emerald silk to match her ring. Serafino wore black and watched her like she was the only person in existence. His vows were unconventional. 2 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life. I had you kidnapped because I was arrogant and controlling, but you turned that worst decision into the best thing that ever happened to me. You forced me to evolve. You showed me that intelligence is more powerful than violence, that legitimacy is stronger than control, that partnership beats dominion every single time. You're the right girl, the only girl." Lily responded through tears. "You grabbed the wrong girl. I wasn't Valentina Volpe. I wasn't anyone important. I was just a broke grad student who restored books nobody read. You grabbed the wrong girl, but somehow I ended up exactly where I needed to be. You said I belonged to you, and you were right. But the beauty of it was, you ended up belonging to me too. entirely on my terms. At the reception in the conservatory, surrounded by rare plants and restored manuscripts, Mia cornered Lily. "Are we going to talk about how you married your kidnapper?" "Former kidnapper. He's reformed." Mia smiled. "You look genuinely, stupidly happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. Love is complicated. Sometimes it starts in the worst possible way and becomes something beautiful anyway." Lily stood in the Foundation's main gallery during the opening of their most ambitious exhibition, Transformation Through Time, Botanical Manuscripts from the Renaissance to Modern Day. The gallery overflowed with academics, donors, and journalists appreciating 18 months of meticulous work. She paused before a 15th-century herbal she'd personally restored, one that had been in Volpe's vault, part of the evidence that brought him down. Illustrations of deadly nightshade and hemlock, perfectly preserved. Serafino found her there. "Reminiscing?" "Remembering," she said, leaning against him comfortably. "This was part of what brought Volpe down. I always wondered why he kept botanical manuscripts mixed with criminal records." "Some people collect beauty even while creating ugliness," Serafino observed, "and some people transform their ugliness into beauty. That's harder but more impressive." "We did that together," Lily agreed. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "How we started?" Lily considered honestly. "I regret being kidnapped, obviously. The fear, the coercion, the loss of choice, those things were real and terrible. But I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret choosing you after I had the power to choose. I don't regret building this life together. You grabbed the wrong girl, Serafino, and somehow that was exactly right." He smiled, the real smile reserved just for her. "The wrong girl who became the right woman, who became my partner, who became my wife, who became my entire world." "That's very poetic for a reformed criminal. I contain multitudes," he said. "You do," Lily agreed, "and I love every complicated, transformed, evolving one of them." They stood together watching their guests appreciate what they'd built, the internationally recognized foundation, the legitimacy they'd fought for, proof that even the worst beginnings could transform into beautiful endings with enough bravery and willingness to evolve together. The Mafia boss had become a philanthropist, the kidnapped girl had become a renowned scholar, the coercion had become partnership, the cage had become a home, and the wrong girl had become the only girl, the one who forced a dangerous man to become someone worth loving, and who loved him anyway, entirely on her own terms. It wasn't the love story anyone would have predicted, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. If you want more stories that make you feel something, stories filled with romance, tension, and unforgettable twists, then subscribe to Bella's Romance Stories. We're building a community of people who believe in powerful, emotional storytelling. Join us, hit that subscribe button, explore our other videos, and let's keep bringing stories to life. Stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. See you in the comments, and tell me your favorite moment from this story.